Turn with me, if you would, this morning to Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 17. As you recall, we've been going through a little series here, talking about being a bodybuilder. And that in turn, it really talks about shaping our lives, right? And making sure we're spiritually fit. We work hard to be physically fit, some of us do. We have aspirations to do that. But what do we do as far as being spiritually fit? And that's something for us to think of daily, right? Just like you think of what you're going to eat daily, you think of what you're going to wear daily. There's a lot of things you do that's daily activity, a whole laundry list of things. Might we also want to consider on a daily basis our conduct and how we carry ourselves and how we respond to the opportunities we have in life. And that's really what Paul is saying here as we continue through this. And so there was some of you may not be, some of you may be Star Wars fans, and you all know about Luke. You know, he was a Jedi Knight, and he was always struggling, right, to recognize his true potential and being able to, fight and protect, the people against the evil empire, and he's always having to face Darth Vader, and he's a Jedi Knight, and one of the things that his mentor always said was, know thyself, Luke. He'd always say, know yourself, In other words, whenever he wasn't being ineffective, and when he wasn't sure he could do the great scope that he was given to do, responsibility, he's know thyself. And I thought, that's kind of something we can maybe keep in our own minds too, to know yourself. And it's really two aspects of self we need to be aware of: who you were and who you are. And if you stop and think about who you were and you can't see a difference in who you were, think of the difference of who you were versus who you are, then maybe that's gotten a little bit blurred. I would encourage you, if you have them, maybe to go back. People look at old things sometimes, old pictures, old, history of yourself, things you may have had from when you were younger, whatever. Every now and then it may not hurt to be a little nostalgic. And it's not necessarily maybe to remember the good old days per se, but just to remind yourself of and reflect upon who you were then, and what were your values, and what were your perspectives on life, and one or two things may come from that. One may be, man, have I changed, hopefully. Another may be, wow, my God has seen us through. How he's brought us a mighty long ways. Because he's brought you a mighty long ways. And sometimes we forget that. In verse 17, Paul says, though, I tell you this. And why is he he's telling them this? If you go back and remember, and go back and look at the previous verses in Ephesians 4 about this. Remember being completely humble? Remember we talked about that? Being completely humble, patient, bearing with one another, right? Putting up with one another's idiosyncrasies, bearing with one another, forgiving as God has forgiven you. We talked about that, about not letting sin have any bondage in your life, being careful to build each other up so we have this total unity. We talked about this total unity, that being a bodybuilder is all about that, so we have faith and knowledge and we become mature. So we won't be like infants tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, every trial that comes up. We won't find ourselves good one moment and bad the next. There'll be this consistency in our lives. We'll let the chaos be on the outside. Remember we talked about that? And not let the chaos be where? On the inside. Because I'm here today to tell you, chaos is going to be here because we live in a fallen world. And so as a result of being in a fallen world, there's always going to be disruption. There's always going to be chaos. I'm sorry, people are going to be people. Okay? People are going to be people. There's always going to be some kind of drama going on. That's the way of the world, right? What we can do is let the drama stay out here and not let the drama be in here. There's going to be trials, there'll be troubles, there'll be tribulations, and in all of that, there can be joy in the journey. But we need to make sure we recognize we'll be a vessel, not a victim. And that comes from keeping this context of what's out here, right? When fear knocks at the door, who answers? Thank you. Somebody was listening a couple of weeks ago. You get a gold star. Okay, because that's what happens when fear knocks. Who's going to knock? We don't allow faith to answer. Faith is not you got it, but that God's got it. If he's for you, whatever's knocking at the door is not going to be able to overcome you. That's what he's saying here. So now we look at this verse 17. He says here, so then I tell you this, and I insist upon, listen to this emphatic statement here. I insist on this, and not in his own strength in the Lord, that you do what? That you stop living like you used to live. He also says it more so, he says here, listen, don't live as the Gentiles do. Now, in the time that this was written, the whole concept of being a Gentile, because we're Gentiles, quite frankly, grafted into the vine, saved by grace, Christ died for all. But in the speaking of here, the audience he was speaking to was still in this Judaism thing, right? So they were still kind of law-oriented, understanding that Christ replacing that. But when he said to them, don't act like the Gentiles, what he was the same as us saying today, don't act like those who don't know Christ. If we had to paraphrase it, that's what he's saying here today. He's telling those who knew Christ to stop acting like they don't know Christ. See? In other words, the problems we have today are not new. Did you know that? Do you know there's nothing that happens in your life that is a new thing that no one's ever experienced before? That's why many times you will go through things, and when you come out of it, you will be able to be a blessing to someone else who's going to, guess what? They're going to have to go through that same thing. So whenever something happens to us, God's going to do something through us that we might be a blessing to someone else that will go through that same kind of thing. Did you know there's nothing new under the sun? It says in Ecclesiastes. Oh, there's some new problem. It may be new to you, but it's not under them. And so he's saying here, I want you to be very careful and don't find yourself torn between two opinions. Don't live as a Gentile. Listen, in the futility of their thinking. Verse 18, listen, they are darkened in their understanding. Did you know this? And I'd be careful here because of words, right? I tend to say this a lot, and people they kind of give me the eye roll, or they kind of like, oh gosh, I'm glad you're saying that about yourself and not me saying it about you. But I tend to say, in the workplace, in different places, I say, I'm ignorant about something. That's what I'll say. I'll say, I'm trying to understand whatever this thing is, and I'll say, because I'm ignorant about this thing. And people have a hard time with someone saying they're ignorant about something. We get this idea of ignorant person being like, okay, poor fellow right now. It's okay to be ignorant. Because all that's really saying is, I don't understand. If you say you're stupid. Now, if I said I was stupid, that's a whole nother problem, right? I'm not going to say, well, I'm stupid about this situation, right? But ignorant means you don't know something. You don't understand something. But it doesn't mean you can't understand. It doesn't mean but you're saying, I don't fully understand. And that may be what I need to start saying. I want to kind of keep it short. I don't get a whole long diatribe about, well, you know, I really don't. I cannot fathom the context of what I'm ignorant. But he's saying here, be very careful. Don't let, again, as he says here in verse 18, they found themselves ignorant to the point of futility. What he's really saying here about them is they were stupid. Because they found themselves consistently in the cycle. Who remembers the cycle? Doing the things you know you ought not do, feeling guilty about it, and guess what? Doing it all over again. Now that's a stupid person. If you do the thing you ought not do, and you become aware of it, and you stop it, that's a wise person. But if you do it all over again, I'm sorry. You're kind of teetering on the stupid side there. Paul called it futility in thinking. In other words, it's a waste. You're not learning from your experiences. And it's a nice kind of way of not telling them that they're stupid. Because they're doing what they know don't work. And they're doing it all over again. And they're expecting, I assume they're expecting different results. Because they say madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you do the same thing, you're going to get them. Just saying. So again, verse 18, he's saying here, but what happened? Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. When we allow ourselves to be in that cycle of doing what we know it's not going to work, and we do it anyway, what really happens? Two things. One, you find yourself in a pickle. I do. In a pickle. I don't think about that. You ever thought about what in a pickle means? In a pickle. You find yourself in a pickle, but here's the more important thing. And listen, verse 18. And listen, and separated. This is where it gets serious. And separated from the life of God. Because, here's that word, I thought I made it up. Because of the ignorance that was in them that was due to, here's the result, the hardened heart. I wrote some things down. A hardened heart leads to three things. It leads to you not being wise. That's what a hardened heart would do. It leads you to being ignorant. It also leads you to, listen to this, unnecessary hardship. Life is hard enough, beloved, with the trials that face us that we don't cause. We don't need to be adding any more to ourselves. And we allow our lives to be conducted by hard hearts as a result of being angry. We won't say that. Angry at God because we keep finding ourselves in a mess. But we're really in a mess because we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Or we keep doing the things we know we ought not do and somehow thinking that it's going to be different this time. And when it's not different, we get mad. As a result, we have a hardened heart. All we're doing is adding more hardship on ourselves that's already there. Wisdom says, maybe if I don't do that again, then I'll get different results. Or maybe if I do the thing I know I ought to do, instead of the thing I know I ought not do, then maybe from that I'll find different results. And three, a hardened heart leads to pride, which separates us from God. Of all the things that we can do in life, I really believe there's one thing that makes a chasm between us and God. And I want you to think about anything that you can do that's not nice, or anything you may be doing that's not nice. And you may think that thing is something that would keep you from being able to approach the throne of grace. I submit there's only one thing that can keep us in that position where we cannot approach the throne of grace. And it's the same thing that caused the fall of Satan, pride. It's same thing that caused the fall of Adam and Eve. Pride. Because Satan told them, God doesn't want you to be like him. He doesn't want you to know. He doesn't want you. And pride is what kicked in. When Satan fell like lightning, it was pride. Because he aspired to be God. And beloved, it's pride that'll keep you and I from even considering approaching the throne of grace. And that's why we won't receive grace. It's not because God won't give it, but pride will let you refuse. I refuse to go. I refuse to surrender. I refuse to say I'm wrong. I refuse to be, I refuse. And I encourage us, because that can happen to all of us. If there's an area in your life where that I refuse creeps up, put it to death. Because that's a seed that will turn into roots of bitterness. And what it does, I'm very serious, I joke a lot. I keep things light, but what it does, it will separate you from the presence of God. Not because he's moved, because you will refuse to enter into his grace. Pride's a bad boy. Pride's a very bad boy. And that's what happens when we have a hardened heart. That's why God wants to touch the heart. That's why God is big on forgiveness. That's why he's big on this love. That's why he's big on grace. Because he knows those are the things that can only thrive where there's no pride. So I encourage us, because it all happens. The sin, the flesh is rooted in pride. And if you find there's something letting you resist being humble, and it's more not that you don't want to be, what you're literally saying, I am not going to surrender. Sometimes you may say it verbally, but many times it's just back here. It's the throttle. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to put up with that. Maybe you've never been there before. Maybe that's never happened to you. I'm just being real without the rest in my own life. Never say never. Just say. So verse 18 is telling us that. Humbly but true. Because we don't want to have this hardened heart. So again, a hardened heart leads to ignorance. Not doing the right thing. Unnecessary hardships. And the most dangerous of them all is pride. Because pride is what separates us from God. Verse 19. He goes on to say to them, in fact, I want to go back and separates them. Listen, because I'm still in verse 18, they have a hardened heart. Verse 19, having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over. Note this, they've given themselves over to sensuality. So they indulge, listen, they indulge, don't miss that. They indulge, that means it's going way beyond they need to. Why would they do that? Why would they indulge in every kind of impurity? Because what you find, beloved, is if you don't allow, remember we talked, there's a place, did you know this? There's a place in you that God designed that can only be filled by himself. Did you know that? That's why that's that longing that you keep getting it, but it's not what you're looking for. You're never filled. You're never fulfilled. It's easily upset. You're up one day and down the next. There's roller coaster things going on, and you think if I have this, I'll be good. But then when you get it, see there's something wrong with it, or you're still not good. You ever been there before? You ever had that happen where you're trying that? You know, that's that longing. That's an area in your life that God designed, by the way. He designed, but you know what, beloved? He designed that to be a place that can only be filled by himself. A spouse won't do it. Your children won't do it. Your job won't do it. The vocation won't do it. The money won't do it. The house won't do it. The town won't do it. The food won't do it. The clothes won't do it. Name it. The sport won't do it. The recreation won't do it. There's an area in your life that, and all those things I just mentioned aren't bad things. They're okay. But they cannot fill that area in your life that's only designed to be filled by God. But the door is shut if the heart is hard. So therefore, God can't come in and make an abode with you, and therefore you will now try to fill that area in your life with other things. And it's amazing how when we are really in that desperate state, we tend to find that's an opportunity to fill it. To fill it with a corrupt version of a good thing. If it's a relationship, it'll be a corrupt version of a relationship. If it's a social media type outlet, it'll be a corrupt version. It'll be a thing that is sin, quite frankly. It's because it's an iniquity. If it's a recreational thing, it becomes a corrupt version. It becomes an indulgence. It becomes an addiction. It becomes that which destroys. Because we're trying to fill that void with something that can only be filled by God. And it can only come in if we allow humility to open the door. Because the first thing God does when he comes into your heart, when Christ seats himself on the throne, he only really wants to get rid of one thing. He calls you to have to be humble. He calls you to have to start caring about others more than you care about yourself. He starts flipping things upside down. He starts taking the things that you held on to and say, why don't you give that thing away? And this starts freaking you out a little bit, right? Because he wants to do a new thing. In fact, I've got it on my phone. What does it say on my phone? It says here, see, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in a wasteland. Isaiah 43:19. I have that on there to remind myself when things are crazy. And I don't know about you, I find my phone like my passy sometimes, like, what email I got, what not negative things, what's on the news, my neck's broke from where it's like this all the time, But the first thing I unlock it, I either want to see my grandchild, or I want to see that text, a text. And that's to remind me, I don't know where your head's at right now, it's pretty much why I put it there. When you pop this screen open, I don't know where your head's at right now. But I want to make sure, do you realize I'm doing something? Are you conscious? And I asked you this, are you conscious of what God is doing in your life? Are you even aware? Can you perceive it? Do you see that he's making a way in a wasteland in your life? Do you see that? Are you even looking for that? So again, I wrote that down. So that lost all sensitivity. I wrote this down. What happens when we lose sensitivity? One, you think about someone who has lost sensitivity as far as their nerves, have nerve damage. What happens? Well, one, they'll have damage they don't even realize. Someone who has nerve damage, they can hurt themselves and not even realize they're hurt. And you know what you can do if you find yourself losing sensitivity? You'll hurt yourself or you'll hurt others. And don't even realize you're doing it. That's not a nice place to be. Also, I wrote this down too. You'll be vulnerable and unaware that you're, and I heard about this too. I knew someone who had diabetes, and and as they became numb in extremities, they would walk out of their shoes and not even realize it. They would just walk right out of their shoes. And they'll look, oh my God, shoes, And you know what the same thing that happens? You can walk right out of your blessings. You can walk right out of the things God's doing. You don't know where you even there. When we're not sensitive, we find ourselves walking out. And I ask you, how are you walking out of your shoes? How are you walking out of the things that God's provided? How are you walking out of provisions? Because of that sensitivity we have. And then lastly, we find ourselves here's what I said earlier, filling ourselves with emptiness, filling the emptiness in our lives with only that which further destroys. Filling the emptiness in our lives with only that which further destroys. So verse 20, he said, now, here's what's beautiful. What he said, and see, let me ask you a question. And you don't have to answer out loud, you don't have to raise your hand. In verse 17 through 19, did I say anything that you can say, yeah, I can identify with that? Yeah, that happens to me. Okay, here's what's interesting. In this text, in verse 17 through 19, Paul was speaking about the Gentiles. Because look what it says in verse 20. You, however, don't miss that. You, however, so what he's saying is, I know everything that Bruce just got finished talking about had nothing to do with you. That's the other people. The problem is we just sat here for the last however many minutes it's been identifying with the other people. He says in verse 20, you, however, did not come to know Christ this way. In other words, that shouldn't apply to your life. Verse 21, surely you heard of him and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that's in Jesus. You were taught. Listen, in other words, you're not ignorant. That's what he's saying here. You were taught. We said a few minutes ago to be ignorant, not to know something. He's saying you know better. You were taught, he says here, verse 22, with regard to your former way of life. When you were, verse 17 through 19. You were taught to do what? To put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. And to do what? Be made new. And in the attitude of your minds. And to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. That's the conduct I'm expecting of you and me. That's what he's saying. We need to stop smiling and laughing and thinking it's okay to say, yeah, I'm a 17 through 19 kind of guy or gal. Yeah. We might need to kind of take that thing a little bit more serious. He's saying that's who you used to be. And if we sit here in the verse 20 mindset of knowing who we say we are in Christ, and then thinking it's okay to be how we used to be, there's a problem. Because what he's saying here is you're not ignorant. You've been taught. You know better. And that's what's wrong right now with the effectiveness of the believers in this world in which we live. Because we won't consistently walk like we know better. Or we're good at pointing out where somebody else has got an issue. Let me ask you a question. This bothers me. I'm a weird dude, okay? So, fine. But I'm also, it was since the Gulf War that I became a news junkie. And I have to be careful. I've shared this before. I have to be careful because I listen to too much news, okay? And I'm not biased on listening to one versus the other. I believe the only way you're going to find out the true news and fair and balanced, whatever words you want to use, is not going to be from any one outlet because they're all trying to do something to make a buck and get us all crazy with one another. But you have to be able to listen with discernment. And I find one thing interesting. How when someone can be found doing the wrong thing, the first thing they want to do is deflect and say, well, look what so-and-so did. Look how, so let me, okay. So you said so-and-so is trash. Okay. But now you want to say that you're going to justify your standard based upon looking at the standard of whom you said before is trash. So now you're saying trash can legitimize your behavior? That's kind of a pretty low standard. Well, that's what we do. We do the same thing. Because we'll say, look at so-and-so. Look how he's treating his wife. Look how their children are. Look how he takes care of himself. Look at that. Look over there. Look, I'm not bad. Look over there. It's the same thing. You can't legitimize or substantiate your character based upon deflecting it to what you said is poor character. Somebody help me here. What am I missing? And I believe we do the same thing. We need to stop deflecting and start acting like we know whose we are. It's not about what your neighbor's doing. It's about how you're conducting your own life. And when we start doing that and then encourage one another to walk in that way, there'll be a change. Because then in the Christian community, you won't find pride. You'll find humility. You'll find us willing to wash one another's feet. We'll become those people that can once again turn the world upside down. But it won't happen as long as we're saying, I'm okay because he or she is worse. Because I'm here today to tell you, the believer understand, it's not your neighbor that's your standard. The standard's right there. And there's something about letting that be your standard that kind of makes you a little bit humble, just saying. And it kind of helps you see that that bar is high. And yet while you are here and the bar is there, he loves you. And he's for you and not against you. And it should give you the strength to stand. Therefore, I want you to do this, as he says here in verse 20 through 24. He says here, remember what you have been taught. Okay? And that will happen because you'll either remember it immediately or the Holy Spirit warns you. You never say never where the Holy Spirit has already not said to you, you know that's not the way to behave. And instead of us humbling ourselves, we double down. Have a new attitude, or I would say a new altitude. You rise above your adversities. Okay? Not wallow in it. Rise above it. Here's another one for you. This is going to be interesting for you. Dare to be the new you. Because we live in a society that finds strength by being, although we don't want to be like other people, we want to be like other people. I don't want to look like anybody. I'm just saying, you may say, well, Pastor, you might ought to work on that one. I don't want to look like anybody. I don't want what anybody else has. I don't want to be anybody but God. I want to be me. I want to be me. Good song, anyway. Even in that, you may say, he's a pastor. He's all, no, I'm me. Be you. Be all God's created you to be. Dare. And listen, don't dare to be proud. Dare to be the vessel that God's created you to be. There's an old saying, just go with the flow. I saw it on a billboard this past week. The only thing goes with the flow is dead fish. I thought, wow, that's kind of true. Be the new you that's willing to swim upstream. You're not being bold and prideful, but you'll find when you're allowing God to use you to be who He's created you to be, that you can be going against the current. You have a different way of behaving than others may behave in the same circles you're in. dare to be the one that will be who God has created you to be. That masterpiece, that one of a kind, that unique vessel that God is using. I don't know about you, but I don't think I ever want to go to school again in my life after I saw that. Let your light shine. Dare to be you. And remember, only dead fish go with the flow.